Well, you know what, you two, thank you so much for coming back. It's awesome. So I'm just going to get straight into it. In any of your recordings, have you ever used the William Helm scream?
I'm going to let Sam answer that, but I mean, yes, it's the Wilhelm. Yeah, it's
I put the Wilhelm in everything I can possibly put it in.
it's kind of mandatory. It's kind of law that you have to either sneak it in or put it in really boldly.
Yeah. It's in a few films. I've done a few films. My favorite one is A Few Best Men.
Surprise! We're in Australia.
All that sun and beer's got to piss you off eventually.
This wedding is important, so I need everyone to behave.
Oh, Jesus, we've lost Luke.
You're going to have to take care of the best man's speech.
Is that Ray's Coke?
This will give you a bit of confidence up there.
Really? Good afternoon, Barbara.
Is that cocaine?
Yeah.
Well, don't just stand there gawping. Line them up! Whatever's going on, you just sort it out.
Because it really annoyed Will Ward that I got it in there.
Yeah.
But it was perfect too, because there was this giant kind of floral arrangement ball bouncing down a hill, and then the crowd scattered, and then it fell off a cliff. And one person that jumped, it just worked perfectly for them jumping out the way.
Of course.
And so, yeah.
Right. What about you, Nigel?
I've put it in a lot of animations. But I think Sam and I, we've been present putting it in various things. I think we snuck it into Australia at one point.
I wouldn't know about that.
No, you wouldn't know about that. Heavens no. But it's kind of, we try and some directors would rather it not be.
I think I was asleep when you put the Wilhelm in.
Yeah, I still have that photo of Sam asleep in the mix stage for Mixing Australia. But it's but yes, the Wilhelm is well known. It's well used.
I love it. There's a you know the I was listening to a podcast yesterday. It was talking about the Wilhelm actually, and then the second lesson that's popular is what's called the Howie scream. And that's the longer one. But it's a longer one. It's used in a lot of video games, I feel like, and stuff.
I feel like I know the one you mean.
It's a bit more aggressive. So here's the Wilhelm scream now. And here's the Howie scream. Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, if you know a sound editor, they should be able to sort that out for you.
So, start with you, Nigel. How did you get into sound design?
I have this whistle that I keep with me. I'll see if I can show it up there. It's called the Acme Siren.
Oh.
And if you remember the cartoons from the 50s, the Warner Brothers, they all had sounds in them. This was actually my granddad's whistle. And
Right.
he was like some sort of home guard during World War II, and this is his whistle.
That's
And
so cool.
I remember playing with it as a kid, and it sounds a little bit like this. And I remember watching a cartoon on TV and then hearing this exact whistle, and I was like, wait a minute, how did someone put that sound in there? Because it wasn't someone blowing a whistle, it was going with an action. It was an action synchronized with the sound. And I was like, oh, so someone puts those sounds in. And so then I started just playing this whistle endlessly, and it started my obsession with sounds accompanied to actions and stories.
That's great. I always want to know how some people get into their occupation or sport and what tips them to that direction. And
well, I was very into music as well, and I did write music for a period in the 90s, but I just wasn't terribly good at it, and so I sort of focused on sound design instead.
how about you, Sam?
I pretty much fell into it. I studied civil engineering at Sydney Uni for a year and hated it. And then I did a TAFE course at Bradfield, a Cert 3 and 4 in music performance. They had a Pro Tools system, and I just fell in love with using the Pro Tools rig that they had. One of the assignments was to do a trailer, and we had to write the script for a made-up trailer and then add all the sound effects and music and stuff. I mean, it would have sounded terrible, but it was fun putting all the footsteps in and all the sound effects and the voiceover and pitching so I think I recorded the voiceover and I pitched it down like some obscene amount so I sounded like Barry White. Yeah, and then I did a music production course at North Sydney TAFE. There was a lot more film aspect to that as well, and kind of just fell in love with it. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And on that, with mixing, I didn't get to ask you this last time. Who determines, is it the director or the budget or yourselves, in terms of this mix is going to be in 2.1, 5.1, 7.1, or Atmos? What's the decision making in that process?
That's pretty much down to the network or studio that you're working for. So all of the studios, Sony, Warner Brothers, etc., have different delivery specs, which outlines what they want theatrically as well as in terms of broadcast and near field, and they're all slightly different. Or like Netflix has, so for example, like Netflix and Stan have different loudness specs, like pretty significantly, in terms of, like, Netflix is one of the, I think Netflix, Disney, and Apple are the only three that use dialogue norm in the loudness spec, whereas everyone else is like an overall loudness. So yeah, it's the people paying for it, basically. Yeah, it's not the director or anyone like that, unless it's like a Nolan. I guess Nolan can say, yeah, you know what, I want to mix it in 12.5 or something. He could do that, but
Or mono. He might, just snap the other way and just go mono.
I could see it happening.
All right. Yeah, I always wanted to know how, like, who decides what sound mix it's going to be in. And
it's just the different studios. When I worked at Stage One as a mix assistant, re-recording engineer, it was really to handle all the deliveries as well as the setup and running the room, is to handle all the deliveries. And I remember back then, so between 2008, 2016, I really liked the Warner Brothers delivery sheets. I really like the naming conventions. That was really schmick. But nowadays, I really like. I do like the Netflix. The Netflix has no fat on it, because some TV studios, they'll have a lot of like legacy deliveries on them that aren't necessary anymore, particularly. Whereas because Netflix is new itself, pretty much, especially Netflix ANZ, and also because it's run like a tech company, its delivery specs are all perfect. Like, there's no excess fat, and I really like their loudness. And yeah,
I'm hoping to review a piece of equipment where it's a high-end dedicated movie streamer, and I wanted to know what code Netflix uses, what code Samsung uses, and Apple and PlayStation. I realized a lot of the apps actually don't perform equally on each device. Quite a mixed bag. Like, PlayStation sounds great, but their codec, in terms of their OS, when it comes to Netflix, the picture in the bitrate is a complete mixed bag. Like, for example, it might be like in HD, it'll encode it at less than 1 meg, and then the next episode, it'll be at 5 meg. And it's like, what is going on here? It's just, so it's interesting from that point of view, mentioning how it's different for each mixing app.
Yeah, like, I do know Netflix, when you're watching Netflix, it recognizes whether you're on a phone or going through, like a TV or a soundbar or something like that. And it will adjust settings automatically. But I think they do it the subtle, with the audio, at least the sound, they do it the subtlest and best. Like, I really like Netflix's delivery platform for my mixes. Other ones, apps and streamers, they might not necessarily alter it at all, or they might alter it a lot.
Yeah.
In terms of the audio. So yeah, it is a mixed bag across the different platforms, for sure. Some do some pretty egregious things to mix, but we won't name names.
I was wondering if you're going to go there, Sam. We've talked about this, and I was, is he going to spill the tea? But we'll keep it clean, keep it nice.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Hey, so I can't do horror. I can't watch horror. I'll probably need therapy afterwards. However, when you're mixing, if you're doing horror, for example, does it have the same effect?
I mean, I think we'll cover it for mixing and sound design. So,
Yeah.
What do you think, Nigel?
Oh, well, I mean, the thing is, it's a bit like experiencing a finished horror film is such a different experience from making one. And I produced one horror movie called Primal in 2010. And so
And you both did The Marshes in 20.
On the Marshes, yeah.
You both did that, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a bit of a thriller horror.
Have you seen it?
I don't know. I can't do gore, and I
Oh, okay.
can't do horror.
It's probably not your bag then.
It's probably not. It's pretty tame. Like I don't think it's
more moody. It's a mood piece, really.
it's a moody-
Marshes.
Yeah.
okay.
With a
It's the thing
message.
of, like, when you've been on set, with the actors and they're just laughing, covered in fake gore and stuff, and then you're going through the sound editorial and you're piecing together all the layers.
Yes.
And it's not that you're desensitized, but you actually, it's like making a cake. Like if you eat a cake and go, fuck, that's amazing. I wonder how they did that. Or you just think, and you don't know.
Right.
But if you actually have been involved in every step of the way, you don't experience it in anything like the same way. And for me, it's like working so closely with the material. If I actually do have an emotional response, I'm like, and then I know that's working because I've seen it 50 times already in all different states and forms. So if it still makes some sort of empathic response in me, then I think, oh, well, okay, that's the way it's supposed to go.
I haven't seen that movie. I don't know if I'll be able to hack it.
No, it's all right. You don't have to watch it. In terms of your question, there's no genres I would turn down particularly. I think it's a bit like music. Like there's good, like Dolly Parton exists and Johnny Cash exists, so country western can be good. And I think it's the same with movies. So I wouldn't turn down, like, I'm not a huge horror guy. I can watch them. So I would love to do horror movies because my daughter loves horror movies. Yeah, sometimes there's films that aren't very good and you might not want to work on them. but
it's a different challenge. Yeah.
No particular genre specifically,
Yeah. Well, on genre, you both did recently, like Sam, you did The Porcelain War, and Nigel, you've done Land of the Free. So when it comes to a documentary, is that quite a challenge because it's a documentary, but you also want to get people involved in the subject matter. So it's doing sound mixing for a documentary. Is that a bit more of a challenge?
Well, I'll talk quickly about Land of the Free. That's a very particular project, and I'm impressed that you've encountered that one. So that's a documentary specifically created to change legislation in the UK and the US around trophy hunting. And they're trying to, but there are all these organizations that actually foster and enable, and people can pay to go and shoot incredible animals in Africa, lions and elephants and so forth, that have actually been bred in captivity, and then they're drugged and they're shot and they cut their heads off and they take them back to their home country, the UK, the USA. And they claim doing it through all sorts of peculiar acts of legislation, saying, well, actually, this is for a museum and this is actually a research piece. And so this film by Lynn Santa, Land of the Free, is in the works for 10 years or more. And it was specifically towards a political end. So I got involved because I know the editor and one of the producers. In terms of filmmaking, it was really quite different from Porcelain War, which Sam talked about, in that it was all interviews and covert footage. So the interviews are quite cleanly recorded and for the most part were well done. And the covert footage was of terrible quality sonically. The material that was conveyed in them is really horrifying. So it was,
right.
So it's really, so that project was actually, for the most part for me, a technical project of actually just, let's get every piece of dialogue as clean as it can and every piece of covert footage as intelligible as possible. So there actually wasn't much of what I would call sound design in that film. It was really about clarifying the message and making it as technically clean as possible, because the message in those interviews and in that covert footage has to be heard. So that was the approach in that documentary, which is very different from others where there's a lot of scope for creation.
How about you, Sam, with documentaries?
Documentaries generally, they're not a bigger challenge than like a feature film, or even a series, I guess. But they're a different challenge for sure. With often, like, so with films, feature like Runt or whatever, if I'm cutting, I like to cut the sound design or cut effects, but With documentaries, I really like to cut the and I prefer like a dialogue editor to cut the dialogue, like a really good dialogue editor to cut the dialogue on a feature film. On documentaries, I like to cut the production because it's so important to be authentic. Sometimes people can clean that up, and there's little bits of gold in there you can use, and sometimes the recordist has gotten a minute of backgrounds, and authentic backgrounds in a doco are worth their weight in gold. On Porcelain War, I didn't cut, I just mixed it. And yeah, the challenge for that was to make it so, just for your listeners, Porcelain War is about the war in Ukraine, and it follows couple Slava and Anya who fled from Crimea in 2012 or 2014, one of those two. They fled from there to Kharkiv, and at that point Slava kind of recognized the threat that Putin posed, and so they're both artists, and they create these beautiful little porcelain figurines. Slava decided to start training and became really, really good rifleman, to the point where now he instructs Ukrainian civilians. Yeah, so there was a few things in that. So the documentary is a real juxtaposition between nature and destruction, and art and love and war, and so in the mix we wanted to really kind of heighten the differences there. So for instance, there's never any birds in the bombed cities, but then they go out for walks in the forest and the birds are beautiful. The big thing for the director was authenticity. So like all the gunshots, for example, are all real, and there's these cutaway sections. There's 3 or 4 sections where we focus in on the porcelain statues and they become animated and they tell a story. And so during those sections, there was heaps of scope for sound design, which the sound designers did an amazing job on. Jared Dwyer and Andrew Miller were sound designers on it, as well as Alex Francis, and Joe Mount and Alex Francis primarily did the animated sections, and they did a beautiful job. And it's a really, really stunning, incredible documentary.
As an extension of what Sam's talking about there, and what I was mentioning, in that when you're working on a film or a dramatic story, then like gunshots and things, you want them to be cool and awesome, or convey a tone or a feeling or an emotion. But when you're making a documentary about a topic that's really serious, then you have to be very careful about misrepresentation. And that's very true in the sound as well. It's why Sam talks about using the real production audio and not as much as possible, because you have there's a journalistic requirement for truth in the sound. You're trying to convey actuality.
Yeah.
You know, at times where there's a dramatization of an event, there might be some scope for being expanded in the sonic palette, but you're still sort of beholden to a larger truth, that you're still actually telling, in these documentaries particularly, a real story that affects real people. And that's a responsibility that comes with working in documentary that you don't have necessarily in other genres.
Unless you're doing a documentary about like skateboarding or surfing, in which case you just make it sound as cool as possible.
Oh yeah, that's different.
Hey, actually, Sam, you did one about fighters.
Life After Fighting's it's a feature film. It's not a doco. Yeah,
This is where I'm going in terms of sound. What do you use when people make contact? I can't believe everything you read, that a sound designer once shoots celery on a cardboard box, like the slap noise, the punch noise. So are you getting sounds from a library, or are you getting it? Is the Foley person making up some sound, or what's the go?
So on Life After Fighting, that was a very tough film, mostly because of the fighting scenes are so good. I was like, fuck, I've got to kind of do this. So in terms of the fight scenes, Foley did a pass. They didn't do any of the punches because they had a very limited time, but they did a lot of cloth moves and some grabs, which were very, very helpful. And I amped those up quite a bit. Daniel Hackett and I went out to the gym. So it's kind of clever filmmaking in that most of the fights, 3 out of the 4 kind of fight scenes occur inside Bren Foster's gym, Elite Martial Arts, out at Minchinbury. And kind of in a similar way to Reservoir Dogs, is all in a warehouse, like it's clever filmmaking to kind of do that. And so me and Daniel Hackett went out to Elite Martial Arts in Minchinbury, and we recorded a whole bunch of like hours and hours of his different classes going on, and got a really wide array of kind of ambiences for those classes. And then we also, after all the classes finished, got a couple of the senior instructors who are also stunties in the film, and we recorded a whole bunch of pad work, different pads, so the like just the focus pads, as well as the proper full-on like tire leg kick pads, and yeah, a whole variety of different pad work. And it was in that space as well on the fights that I covered, because I got Jared and Andrew again to cover the last fight scene. I used all the pad work as a first pass, and it worked even for the blocks really well. So all the pad work I recorded in that space, all the blocks and all of the punches, I used different pad work, and I wasn't so worried about what it actually was in terms of focus pad or the tire pads. I was just interested in what it sounded like. And then so after I did that pass, I used library effects to beef up certain special ones. And then also for those fights, they're quite heightened. They're kind of an homage to martial arts from years gone by, like Fist of Legend with Jet Li, or No Retreat, No Surrender with Van Damme, like those old school ones. So I did pretty gnarly with the whooshes and the impacts on the big kicks and used like anything from explosions to thunder cracks to whatever on some of the punches. Yeah. So
that's what we look forward to. Blue Eye Samurai. You're gonna go the next level. You're gonna take it up a whole nother notch.
Oh, Blue Eye Samurai season 2. Yeah, no, we'll definitely try, and it'll be good to That's gonna be excellent.
Hey, how many layers were there in your in the hits, in the impacts for the Life After Fighting? Generally, do you think, how many layers did you put in?
How many layers? Oh, not heaps. Like there's the pad work, and then like maybe 3 or 4 others, but maybe except for the last one, like the last few punches in a few of the fights where I put like, I don't know, 18 different things in, maybe, or more. Like
yeah, nice.
Has there been any at time, when you just talked about layers, I think and you both might know this more than I think it was Lord of the Rings Return of the King, and the sound designer near the end, total spoilers here, it's been out for a long time, so I'm just going to go there. The elephants at the end, the massive big war.
Olifants.
Yeah. So originally, I think they had, when the elephants were walking, they actually had 4 steps, and they realized it's too much, because you're hearing dunk, 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 and they went, we need to just have dunk, 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 and they reduced it back to 2. Have you have any mixes where you've got it, you're listening to it, and then you're going, it's too much there. I need to refine it, or it's too much for the audience. Have you, on any of the movies you've done, you've had to tone it back a bit?
Oh,
pretty much all of them.
Pretty much all of them.
So sound design, obviously, is very focused and purposeful, but it's a bit like filling the sandbox with sand, and then you really kind of make the castle in a mix. Like, obviously the castle's already built, but like the mixing is all about focus. What do you want the audience to be focusing on right now? And so everybody does their parts, whether it's music or sound design, Foley. Everyone does their best in every moment, but a lot of scenes will want just music, or you want to get rid of the music, or maybe a lot of Foley. I love Foley, but a lot of Foley gets in the way and can be too literal, so you don't want to use it. So yeah, the mix is all about sonic focus pulling. That's all about stripping stuff out. Rick Rubin said the edit's not finished when you can't add any more. It's finished when you can't take anything else away. I think that's definitely how I sort of see it. And I've become a lot less precious, and to the point where I'm not precious at all in terms of what does the scene want? Does it want just music? Does it want everything? You know.
And from the sound designer's standpoint, which is more where I work, you want to create all of the possible elements and layers that the mixer might want.
Yeah.
And so you might look at a scene and you think, oh, there could be a tableau of activity in the background. There could be a really rich, atmospheric environment. There's all the sounds of the action that are actually happening, and then there's all the sounds of the action that you can't see on screen that are happening. And so the sound designer creates all of it, ideally, and then might sort of give a general indication of which things I think might be important or central at a different moment, and present that to the mixer and the director. And then it's like, oh no, let's focus on this moment now, and then shift focus to this element here, which brings us back to this bit of dialogue now, and make space for the music. So everyone prior to that point has done an enormous amount of construction and creation and editing to then give Sam or someone like Sam the opportunity to shift focus, change balance, or take it all out completely. But you need to go through the process of creating it all first, because you can't take out what isn't there.
I'm glad you brought that up, Nigel, because I always wanted to know this as well. When it comes to the score, who decides that, no, I want the score to be the main feature for this scene, or I want the score to be here and the sound effects here? Who makes that decision? Is it the sound designer or the director saying, no, I want the score to be prominent in this scene? Who makes, how do you balance that?
Some sound designers wish it was them.
All sound designers think they're right.
But it's the director. It's the director. At the end of the day, film is an art form. A lot of people would probably disagree, but art is an expression of yourself, right? Film is very unique in that it takes a collaboration of an army of people to complete. But really, it's an art form for the writer and the director to express themselves, and mostly the director. So everybody else, including the DOP down to the gaffers and the sound design and the mixer, everybody else is there to service the director's vision and their self-expression. We like to sometimes, and you end up with really good work if you can really lock in on that and they're a good director. But and sometimes you will be able to express yourself with their vision, and other times you won't. But the job is to service their vision, and that's it. So it's the director. Everything is the director. The music levels, So generally, if I've got a decent amount to premix, how I like to mix. I like to premix the backgrounds first, and then the dialogue, and then the Foley, and then the effects. And then if I've got the music, when I get the music, I mute everything except for the dialogue and the music, and I do a pass on the dialogue and the music together. Then I unmute everything and do a pass with everything. And when I've done that, then that's best case scenario. I'm ready for the director, and the director comes in and he hears everything, and I've given everything a chance. I've not made too many huge arbitrary decisions. Most of the time, everything's there, and the director would go through scene by scene, and the directors go. It's down to their taste. Really, all mixers and sound designers are pretty good. And then how good a series sounds or a movie sounds is down to the director and the filmmakers. TV is different. It's usually like showrunners and producers, and it can be a little bit more committee-like. But film, it's the director. Everything.
How about you, Nigel? Have you worked on films where you've had to juggle that balance with the score and the sound effects?
Oh, always. And as Sam said, it's ultimately the director. I mean, the classic scenario that comes up all the time is where a music crescendo up to, say, a hit or an explosion or some monumental event on screen is equally valid to be a sound design moment or a music moment. And sometimes inexperienced composers will immediately put a crescendo right at the point of a giant climactic action. And so does a sound designer. And so it requires some conversation at times. Otherwise, you end up with just a cacophony rather than a sculpted, designed or thought through moment. And good directors know that, and it's ultimately their call as to what will dominate and which type of music or sound design will punctuate an emotional or a dramatic or an action moment. So it's always a juggle. Yeah,
it's a real dance in the mix. I suspect with that Oliphant story, and I haven't seen the video, but I suspect when the sound designers laid it up, and they may not have had the music to work against. It sounded great with 4 feet, but then when you had the score as well, that's when it became too much, and that's when they went, nah, to really tell the story, like people were like, when there's 4, like, what even is that? But to tell, like, these are the Oliphant's feet, it's just the 2 front feet that we see on screen, and that clashes less with the music. I reckon that might have been the case. But yeah, it's a real dance between the effects, and it's always a dance between effects and music. The best example recently I can think of, sorry, I think I clipped there. The best example I could think of recently is in Dune 2 during the sandworm scene when Timothy Olyphant jumps on the sandworm for the first time. It's like brutal effects, like loud effects for the first kind of half of that sequence. And then that all gives way to triumphant music. And it's a really, really tasteful, sexy dance between the effects and the music. Yeah, that's the best example I can think of recently that I've seen.
Yeah, that was a masterful moment where the truly monumental sound initially gives you that awe. It's like, oh, this is massive. Felt that. Then the score gives you the emotional feedback for the characters who are experiencing that.
Yeah, and sometimes the instinct might be to play both at the same time and they're fighting each other, but the moment wouldn't have been as satisfying if it had score and sound design the whole way through.
and you hear it and experience it fully. But if you actually keep it going at that same volume and intensity, your perception of it diminishes, because it's like, oh yeah, I've heard that. So you stop responding in the same way.
I watched something in terms of sound that, Sam, you commented on it, and it totally took me by surprise. And I'm sure you've both seen this. And I was sitting there, and it was a quiet movie. But then when something happened, it was quite impactful. And that was Knowing with Nicolas Cage. And the director is Alex
Proyas.
Thank you.
I want each of you to draw me a picture of what you think the future is going to look like. Then we'll put the picture in the time capsule, and 50 years from today, a group will open it to see what you drew.
What are you doing with this? You weren't supposed to bring this home. It belongs to the school.
But maybe it means something. Like a math puzzle or something.
Stay with me. I know how this sounds. But I've matched these numbers to the dates of every major global disaster for the last 50 years in perfect sequence. Earthquakes, fires, tsunamis. The next number on the chain predicts that tomorrow, somewhere on the planet, 81 people are going to die.
Yes, and that plane scene, oh my goodness, that was so impactful. And the plane, like the turbulence, the whistle that it came, it just, I would describe the mix as quiet but dynamic. Like, I was just like, wow. And that train scene in the subway, my goodness. Have you both seen the movie?
Yeah, I remember. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I have seen it.
I worked on Knowing back in 2009 as a mix assistant / re-recording engineer.
That was at stage one, wasn't it, Sam? Was that where?
Yeah, we mixed that. Yeah, we mixed that. Phil Haywood and Robert Sullivan mixed that. Robert Sullivan mixing the effects. He did an amazing job.
I was really impressed. I was like, wow. And I picked it up secondhand, still booked secondhand for $10.
Michael McManamy was the sound designer on that. He did an incredible. Yeah, and David White worked on it as well. Michael McManamy did those sequences, the plane, the train, the end of the film was a group effort. It was sound supervised by Andrew Plain. Yeah, that's a very loud. That's the loudest film to this day in terms of the loud moments that I've ever worked on, easily, and not just bottom end, like lots of top end. Like
it was amazing. I was like,
rips your head off. Yeah.
And that's what I was mentioning in one of my reviews for the Anthem Power Amp, that home theater over music, it's the dynamic range is just, and it will really give your speakers a run. And I have had tracks that I've hooked up in people's homes, and it's made the speakers gurgle because they just can't handle that dynamic range, that mid range and that top end just start to go staticky and fuzzy because it can't handle it.
We mixed that film knowing, I think it's okay to say this now, in a Dolby. Dolby was like
Dolby certified, wasn't it? It was
no, not certified. It was like Dolby Premiere. Dolby Premiere Studio, which there was only like 3 of them at the time in the world. We blew a lot of surrounds during that mix. Robert,
really?
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
We blew at least 3 surrounds during that mix.
Far out.
Big JBL.
Oh my goodness. Again, thank you for your time.
Thanks
finishing this off for me. That's just awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Oh,
No
pleasure.
worries.
Always a pleasure.
Excellent.
Good to see you, Nige.
Nice to see you too, Sam.
All right. Take it easy, guys.